I don't know why. It was like it made me look at things in a different perspective. Not like I didn't always.
He grew up in public housing, surrounded by gang violence and broken systems. By his teens, he was already making America laugh. By his 20s, he was rich, famous, and powerful. But somewhere along the way, Nick Cannon stopped being just a comedian and became one of the most controversial figures in modern Hollywood. A Nickelodeon prodigy, a box office star, a television mogul, a man married to one of the most famous women on earth, and later a headline magnate, a cultural debate, and a symbol of fame without boundaries. Some call him brilliant. Others call him reckless. Many don't know what to think at all. So how did a kid raised by his grandfather in San Diego turn into a media empire? A lightning rod for controversy and one of the most unconventional figures in American entertainment. This isn't just the story of success. It's the story of ambition, control, identity, and what happens when fame never lets go. Nick Cannon was born in 1980 in San Diego, California. His early life was anything but glamorous. Raised largely by his grandfather in the Lincoln Park Bay Vista housing projects, Nick grew up surrounded by poverty, crime, and constant instability. Gang culture wasn't distant. It was right outside his door. Comedy became his escape. Not for applause, but for survival. By the age of 8, Nick was already performing stand-up. By his teens, he had experienced realities most children never should: violence, fear, and the pressure to grow up fast. At one point, Nick even affiliated with gangs, a decision he later described as a search for belonging and protection. But unlike many around him, he found a way out. His grandfather became his anchor, instilling discipline, work ethic, and belief. Those early years shaped Nick's personality forever. Hyper-driven, fiercely independent, and obsessed with control. Even as a child, he didn't just want fame. He wanted ownership, power, and a future that looked nothing like his past. Nick Cannon's talent was impossible to ignore. In the late 1990s, his stand-up performances began opening doors. Soon, Nickelodeon noticed. Then Came All That, the sketch comedy show, introduced Nick to millions of young viewers. But more importantly, it introduced him to the mechanics of television. He wasn't just acting. He was watching, learning, studying how shows were built. That curiosity paid off when he launched The Nick Cannon Show in 2002, at just 21 years old. Nick wasn't only the star, he was a writer and producer. Hollywood saw a young comedian with energy and charm. Nick saw leverage. Around the same time, his film career began to take shape. Roles in movies like Drumline turned him into a recognizable face beyond kids' TV. Unlike many young stars, Nick didn't wait to be chosen. He created opportunities by his early 20s. He had already established himself not just as a performer, but as a brand in the making. The 2000s transformed Nick Cannon into a household name. Movies, music, hosting gigs. Executive producer credits, then came Wild and Out. What started as a comedic experiment became a cultural phenomenon. The show launched careers, shaped hip-hop comedy, and proved Nick's instincts were sharp. But nothing elevated his public profile more than his marriage to Mariah Carey. Suddenly, Nick Cannon wasn't just successful, he was Hollywood royalty. The age gap, the fame, the headlines, everything about the relationship fascinated the public at the same time. Nick became a major television host, including a high-profile role on America's Got Talent. Behind the scenes, he was building quietly. Production companies, executive roles, long-term deals by all outward appearances. Nick Cannon had one: money, influence, a beautiful family, cultural relevance. But fame has a way of amplifying everything, including ego, mistakes, and pressure. And cracks were forming. Nick Cannon's downfall didn't come from one single moment. It came from accumulation. public statements that crossed lines, comments that sparked outrage, a controversial interview that cost him America's Got Talent. Suddenly, Nick wasn't being praised, he was being scrutinized. Then came the internet era. His personal life became public property. Multiple relationships, multiple partners, multiple children announced one after another. For some, it was empowerment. For others, irresponsibility. Headlines shifted fast. Was Nick Cannon redefining modern family structures? Or was he losing control of his own narrative? Memes replaced admiration. Criticism drowned out nuance. At the same time, health issues surfaced. Nick revealed his battle with lupus, a chronic illness that added another layer of vulnerability. The pressure was relentless. The same man once celebrated for intelligence and ambition became a cultural punchline. Hollywood didn't exile him completely, but the tone had changed. Nick Cannon was no longer untouchable. Instead of retreating, Nick Cannon adapted. He leaned into ownership, expanded his business ventures, spoke openly about health, mortality, and fatherhood. Rather than chasing approval, he began redefining success on his own terms. Nick stopped asking for permission. He focused on creating platforms, supporting young talent, and controlling his narrative, even when it was messy. To some, it felt like defiance. To others, Nick Cannon didn't try to be liked again. He tried to be free in an industry built on image. He chose transparency and accepted the consequences. Nick Cannon's legacy is complicated and unfinished. He is a child prodigy who escaped the streets, a comedian who became a mogul, a cultural figure who forced conversations about race, power, health, and family, loved by some, criticized by many, ignored by none. His story exposes a truth about Hollywood. Fame doesn't come with instructions. Nick Cannon didn't follow the rules and paid the price for it. But he also proved that survival in the spotlight requires more than talent. It requires control, adaptation, and the courage to live with your choices, whether history remembers him as misunderstood or reckless. One thing is undeniable. Nick Cannon never disappeared, and in Hollywood, that alone is a victory.